Morning. Can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee A, which, due to government advice to practice social distancing, will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or on silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all of the times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to them in order that I receive the request. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of the microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before I proceed to the agenda business, I will outline to all present the procedure that will be followed by the licensing hearing. Number one will be the introduction. Number two, introduction from licensing officer. Number three, the applicant's case. Number four, the objector's case. Number five, closing statement. Number six, advice from licensing officer and or legal officer. Number seven, consideration of application. And number eight, the announcement of the decision. So I think at this moment in time, it would be a good opportunity for everybody to introduce themselves. As I said, my name is David Lewis. I'm chairing this subcommittee group this morning. Could Mr. Andrew Kemp introduce himself, please?
Good morning, Councillor Lewis and Licensing Committee. My name's Andrew Kemp. I'm the Licensing Officer for Parkdean Resorts.
Thank you. Charles Holland.
Good morning, Chair. My name's Charles Holland. I'm a barrister and I'm acting as legal advisor to the committee today.
Thank you very much. Councillor Aniel Pachella.
Thank you, Chair. Elected member for Bridgend County Borough Council and Community Council for the Bracklow Ward, Bridgend. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Beadle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Tom Beadle, elected member for Maesteg East.
Thank you. James Holgate.
Hello there, my name's James Holgate. I'm the AV Services Manager for Parkdean Resorts.
Okay. Jonathan Guest.
I'm assuming that might be me. My name's Councillor Jonathan Pratt, representing Newton on Porthcawl Town Council.
You are down as well, but thank you for that.
Sorry.
Thank you. James Griffith.
Good morning, everybody. I'm James Griffith, the Complex Manager for Treco Bay.
Jonathan Smith.
Good morning, councillors. Jonathan Smith. I'm a solicitor at Poppleston Allen. I'm representing the applicant. I've got sat with me, I've got Kelly Ball, who is the entertainment manager for Treco Bay as well. She's in the same room as me.
Thank you very much. Julie Ellams.
Hello, my name is Julie Ellams. I'm Democratic Services and I'm covering the electronics this morning.
Ken Bonham. You're muted. Mr. Bonham, you're muted.
I've just unmuted, Chair. Apologies for that. I'm suffering from COVID at the moment, so you'll have to forgive my voice anyway. My name's Ken Bonham, Chair. I am a very concerned resident of the Newton area of Porthcawl.
Thank you very much. Will Lane.
Hi, thanks, Chair. My name's Will Lane. I'm an operational manager in the Shared Regulatory Service, and we provide environmental health, trading standards and licensing functions across Bridgend, Cardiff and Vale.
Okay. Mark Galvin.
Thank you, Chair. I work in Democratic Services section. We support all meetings of the council and I'm taking the minute today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Sharon Jones.
My name's Sharon Jones. I'm a licensing assistant for Bridgend Council.
Thank you, Sharon. Neil Morgan.
Morning all, my name is Neil Morgan. I'm the Director of Acoustic and part of the acoustics team working on the licensing application for Parkdean.
Thank you. Stephen Griffiths.
Stephen Griffiths, Development and Construction Director for Parkdean. If there's any questions for me, I'm here.
Thank you. Yvonne Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's Yvonne Witchell, the team manager for licensing at Bridgend County Borough Council.
Thank you. Ted Peskett.
Hi, I'm Ted Peskett. I'm just the local democracy reporter at Wales Online.
Thank you. Victor Valeron.
Good morning, all. I'm Victor Valeron, Technical Director at Inacoustic, and I've worked on the noise impact assessment for the applicant.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe that's everybody. Have I missed anybody out, please? No? Okay. With that, I will proceed into the agenda. Number one, apologies for absence, please. None. Two, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No. Number three, Licensing Act 2003, application to vary a premises license under Section 34. I will now ask the team manager of licensing to introduce the report. Thank you. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just mention that there were two other residents who had expressed a wish to join the call, and I'm not certain if the Democratic officer could maybe check whether they're having difficulty joining the meeting, please.
Hi, Yvonne. We haven't had any indication by email that is the case.
We had a wish from Mr. Jonathan David, who'd been asked to be sent a link.
He's been sent a link to join.
And sorry to interrupt. I am here. I am in the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. David. And there was also a resident, Mr. Simon Judd, who'd expressed a wish to receive a link.
I believe the link's been sent, but we've had no communication from Mr. Judd.
Okay, perhaps, Chair, at the appropriate time when the residents who have expressed a wish to speak, we could do a recheck that there haven't been any difficulties or that person is present. Okay, if I move then, as the chair has said, the purpose of the report before you this morning is to determine an application received from Upper Bay Limited to vary a premises licence in force at Treco Bay Leisure Park, Porthcawl. Since the report pack and the report link was sent out to all the parties, there have been some developments which I'd like to outline for you and for the purposes of the minutes. Obviously, the applicant will be invited to expand in due course, but for the purpose of the minutes, could I just confirm, please, that additional papers were sent out to members and residents last night, and they comprise the following additional documents: a set of proposed conditions, a noise management plan version 2, a photograph showing a location of a stage at the leisure park, a report from InAcoustic dated the 11th of March 2022, an existing layout plan, and a plan edged blue. Has any party not received those documents?
They were received at 5:22 yesterday evening.
Thank you, Mr. Bonham. Could you note that your microphone is on, please, and if you could mute after you've spoken, please.
Okay, thank you.
If any of them, we have a raised hand function, so if anyone's had any difficulties or hasn't received those documents, could you please indicate that? Otherwise, I will assume the documents have been sent and received. Mr. Bonham, I can see you've got your hand up.
Well, to add to the fact that they were received at 5:22 yesterday evening, when I was just about to sit down and have something to eat, there was quite an extensive amount of documentation, which I'm not too sure how anyone was expected to go through all that by 10 o'clock this morning and actually draw any conclusion.
The process for the meeting, Mr. Bonham, the applicant will be presenting the full application, and at that point all the parties will have an opportunity to ask questions and review the process. But within the regulations there is opportunity for additional documentation to be submitted, and I don't know whether our legal officer would like to confirm I've expressed that correctly.
Mr. Holland,
Mr. Holland. Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, it has to happen at some point, Chair. The position is that under the Licensing Act 2003 hearings regulations, information can be submitted at any point before the day of the hearing. If it comes on the day of the hearing, it can only be admitted with the consent of the parties, but as the information was submitted before then, it's admissible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I may, I will just run through the rest of the information and documentation in respect of the report. For comparison purposes, a copy of the current premises licence and plan is within the report pack. The amended application and plan as well has been submitted. From a technical point of view, the application has been advertised and served on the responsible authorities. I would draw the meeting's attention to the representations that have been received, and they are set out at Appendix E of your report. In addition, for information purposes only, there is a location plan attached at Appendix F. For the information of the meeting, the representations of shared regulatory services have been withdrawn, and the applicant will address you on that further in due course. There are other persons who have made representations. The schedule contains all those residents who have made representations. None of the representations have been withdrawn, and therefore a hearing of this application is necessary. A number of the residents expressed a wish to be present. There were 4 of them. At due course, they will be introduced and their representation numbers highlighted, but Councillor Jonathan Pratt's representation is number 34 at the pack. Kenneth and Myrta Bonham's representations are number 59 of the pack. Jonathan David, number 50 within the schedule, and Mr. Simon Judd, number 67. Chair, the remainder of the report just sets out for information purposes what constitutes relevant representations and why certain of the representations haven't come forward to this meeting. And finally, in your pack, there are sections relating to the statutory guidance under the Licensing Act and the Council's policy in relation to the application and the area. At this point, I don't have any further information for the meeting. So unless members or parties have questions for myself or for Mr. Holland, the legal officer, the next stage, Chair, is for the applicant to present the application to you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Anyone, any questions, please? No, there are no hands up. We go on to the applicant's case, please.
Thank you, councillors. Can I just make sure councillors and resident objectors, you can all hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
I can anyway.
So my name's Jonathan Smith. I'm a solicitor from Poppleston Allen. We represent the applicant. There's been a slight problem. One of our number getting on to the meeting today, councillors, and that's Pete Stedman, who is the head of Park Experience. Now he's sat with James Holgate, who is on the meeting. But if there is a question, I may have to refer that on to Pete Stedman through James Holgate, but Pete Stedman's been struggling to get on. Councillors, the application and the extent of it is outlined at paragraph 3.7 of your report, and there are a number of aspects to the variation. There is obviously the application to extend live and recorded music to 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's the one I'm going to very much concentrate on, because that is the one that has received all the objections are about that, other than the alcohol sales for 24 hours. There is a second application to amend opening hours only, and I have stressed that in the conditions that this is opening hours only we're seeking to amend to 24 hours a day, and I will explain the reason behind that. There is a third application, part of the variation, to approve alterations within various parts of the buildings and within the walkway between the 2 buildings called the Pavilion. And then there's also an application to amend some conditions as a result of the works and also take off some conditions from the licence that are historic and out of date. So if I could just first of all deal with the opening hours and the request to amend that, councillors, because there are a number of
Mr. Smith, you muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
When did you stop hearing me, councillor?
When you started outlining why you want the extension.
For the opening hours?
Yeah.
Okay, right, okay, thank you. I don't quite understand what happened there, because my laptop suddenly muted itself, which was a bit strange. So yes, there is a request for opening hours for 24 hours a day. And if, councillors, you could have a look at the plan that was sent to yourselves. And it forms part of the agenda papers at paragraph 39. There is an area which has got blue hatching on it. And in your pack at page 39, there is a central area which runs from east to west, west to east, between the two buildings. Within that area, the proposal is to include the stage, but it is also a walkway between the east and the west of the complex buildings and vice versa. Now, if we can't open that corridor, that walkway for 24 hours, guests would have to walk all the way round the complexes and also the entertainment areas, the golf, etc. So the sole request is for 24 hours because that area is becoming enclosed. It's having glass screening and also mesh walls to it. And we'd like people to be able to walk through that area from one side of the park to the other. The alcohol sales still finish at 11 o'clock as they can now outdoors. And they finish at 2 o'clock in the morning for the indoor areas, but they're already on the licence. There's absolutely no application made to extend those hours, councillors. And I think there's some confusion because it referred to 24 hours in the notice, our blue notice, as it should, but that 24 hours, just to stress, is only for the opening of that corridor in the pavilion. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect of the application, which hasn't been raised as a concern by anybody, are we're doing alterations to the various areas in the park. So there are internal works going on in the Fantasia building. There's some works going on internally in Burger King. The old Time Out nightclub on the park is becoming an Indian restaurant. There are some internal works going on at Coast. And externally within the pavilion, the central corridor between the two buildings, there's a couple of bars been introduced which will sell alcohol, a tiki beach bar and a coffee bar, and there's also external seating areas going in there outside the various venues in the two complex buildings. So you can sit outside in the pavilion and sit there, eat, have a drink, and you can hopefully listen to music. And please bear in mind that area is already licensed for music until 11 o'clock at night, councillors. So that's the works that are planned. I did send a picture of the stage to you in the documents that we sent in. There was a picture of the stage and it being built. So it's a fairly small stage area, as you can see. That was the picture that I sent over. It has a stage area between two concrete structures with some area in front of it that will be used in conjunction with the stage for people to sit on, listen to music, or that may be removed as well if people want to have a dance in front of it. So those are the alterations that are planned in terms of structural alterations. And then the third aspect, before I get to the outdoor entertainment, is to amend conditions on the licence, some of which are out of date and some of which are as a result of us removing the Time Out nightclub. And again, I don't think there's any objections to these conditions being removed. The police have the application, they've been through it, there's no representations from the police. So in your agenda, councillors, on page 15, it's the conditions start. So the conditions which we're looking to remove on page 15 of the agenda from the licence is condition number 1. And that's because it's an old condition which dates back to 2003 when we originally made the application to convert the licence over to a new premises licence. Number 6, which is a condition which requires the premises to be built in accordance with the plans. Well, they were built in accordance with the plans, so that's historic. Then on page 16, conditions 2, 3 and 4, we've asked to be removed because the adult nightclub which is Time Out, is becoming an Indian restaurant. There's no objection from the police to remove those. That's 2, 3 and 4 on page 16. And then on page 17 of your agenda, at the top, we've asked for free drinking water to be removed. The reason for that is that the requirement to provide free drinking water is a mandatory requirement on every single premises license. Then conditions 5, no one under the age of 18 will be allowed in the adult nightclub. We've asked for that to be removed. The reason behind that is obviously there is no adult nightclub there anymore. Conditions 6 and 7, we've simply amended those on our application, just reworded them, and the rewording of those conditions is on page 35 of your agenda. So I'll leave you to have a look at that, Councillor. It's just reworded because of the use of the different areas. Prevention of public nuisance, we're seeking to remove that, and I'll come on to what we're looking to replace that with, councillors, in the conditions which were sent last night. And then finally, on page 17, the conditions number 1, 4 and 5 there again are being replaced by the conditions which are on page 35 in our application, and condition 3 on the protection of children from harm again is removed because Time Out, the adult nightclub, is no longer there. So those are, if you like, councillors, the parts of the application which have not attracted representations. But I now want to just turn obviously to the application for the change 2 hours to 2 o'clock. There is already on the premises licence permission to provide various forms of entertainment in outdoor areas, which are shown on as edged in green on the plan that you have and is attached to the premises licence, to between the hours of 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. and it's plays, films, boxing, wrestling, live and recorded music, and sell alcohol. We can provide all of that till 11 o'clock at night from 10 o'clock in the morning. The application was for live and recorded music only of those categories of entertainment to be extended to 2 o'clock, 7 days a week from 11 o'clock at night. We, as you can see, received a lot of objections to that proposal. We entered into dialogue with Emma Aston from Regulatory Shared Services. Shared Regulatory Services, and we put forward some modified proposals to Emma, and those were accepted as amended conditions. And those conditions, councillors, were circulated last night. Can I just take you through them, please? So the first one is that live and recorded music in the area hatched blue on the plan. Now, the area hatched blue is the pavilion area. That is an area which is between the two complex buildings. It has a tensile structure on the roof of it, and then it has glass structure up to 2.5 metres at either end, with then some mesh gauze acoustic filling above that. And so that is the only area we're looking to extend beyond 11 o'clock. And we've asked now, instead of the flexibility of having it all year, we've asked for 6 occasions of 4 consecutive days in a calendar year, when live and recording music could continue to midnight on a Thursday, 1 o'clock on a Friday and Saturday, and midnight on a Sunday. And then in addition to that, we've also asked for a 1 o'clock extension in that area on New Year's Eve into New Year's Day. So that's a total of 25 days. And that's with us giving at least 8 weeks notice to the licensing authority and also Shared Regulatory Services that we would like to do that. And the reason that we've asked for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is we have event weekends here. So we have an Elvis weekend, we have a rock stock weekend, we may have further events in the future, such as an MTV weekend or an ABBAFest weekend. And they typically start on a Thursday, when entertainment would end at midnight, Friday and Saturday, 1 o'clock, and then on a Sunday till midnight. So that's why it's a series of 4 days. So it's for these, if you like, these different weekends that they cater for. So we've been quite specific in limiting the number of occasions and limiting it to those weekends which we notify to you in advance. And actually, in your statement of licensing policy, councillors, it's recognises that if you are in a sensitive area with residents in earshot at 5.16, that it's better to consider limiting the number of occasions specifically that you would apply for later entertainment. So condition 2 that we've then put forward is and agreed with shared regulatory services is the areas where live and recorded music can be provided outdoors beyond 2300 is shown blue on the attached drawing. So it is only within the tensile structure known as the pavilion. Councillors, there is an error on that condition number 2, and I just ask your solicitor to note, or sorry, barrister to note, counsel to note, that it should say the areas where live and recorded music can be provided outdoors beyond 2300 Monday to Sunday is shown on blue. It wouldn't go until 0200, so it's only after 2300, and I don't mind saying midnight or 1 o'clock on those hours above, but that condition should refer to the hours above in condition 1. Number 3 is there will be no entertainment in the form of karaoke in that tensile structure. Number 4 is a noise limiter, and this was very important to Emma Aston, that a noise limiter is to be fitted to the sound system in that area. And most importantly for you councillors, it will be set in agreement with shared regulatory services upon commissioning and before the area being used, and it will not be exceeded. Number 5, the premises licence holder will observe the noise management plan, which I'll take you to shortly. At number 6, a direct telephone number and email address will be provided, which will provide direct access to somebody on park. Now, we'll have to do that through EHO and licensing because we don't have the email addresses of those who've objected. And then finally, number 7, a record will be kept of noise monitoring that's carried out after 11 o'clock, which I'll come on to, and of any complaints received and how they're dealt with. And they're kept for 12 months. So those are the conditions which we put forward. And as a result of that, shared regulatory services withdrew their representation. The conditions, councillors, refer to an acoustic report, and I will try and take you through that as very quickly because it is quite complicated, and we do have the gentleman who prepared this report with us on the call, and they're much better placed than I am, councillors, to help you with any questions. I've seen quite a few of these in my time, so I'll briefly take you through it, but I suspect there may be questions about it. And obviously I have Victor and Neil here from InAcoustic who provided the report. So on page 6 of the report, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, you'll be glad to hear, councillors, on page 6 of the report at the bottom, the InAcoustic's address on what basis they are making their recommendations, on what code of practice they're relying. And they're relying upon a code of practice that is referred to there. And the code of practice on environmental noise control at concerts says at the bottom, for events continuing or held between the hours of 11 and 9, the music noise should not be audible within the noise sensitive premises with windows open in a typical manner for ventilation. So that is the basis on which the report's been prepared. On page 8 of the report, it refers to the variation at the top in the first 2 paragraphs that's being sought. It describes the area with as a tensile structure covering, installed between 2 existing buildings with both ends enclosed by fabric mesh, infill panels and lower level glazing. So it just identifies and talks about the area. The stage itself is going somewhere around about the top of that red colouring you can see, is going in there, and around about the middle of it roughly is where the stage will be. Further down on page 8, it mentions the fact that InAcoustics have assumed, and they're correct, that there will be a Formula Sound automatic volume control noise limiting device. In other words, the amplification of music on the stage from that area will be run through a system that has a noise limiting device. On page 9, the acousticians mention the hours during which they undertook the background noise readings, and this is where it gets very technical. And they undertook the noise readings at 2 measuring points they call MP1 and MP2, and they're shown on page 10, with MP2 being to the north of the park at the entrance, and MP1 being to due east of the park towards Bayview Road. And they were regarded as the nearest 2 noise sensitive points. So the acousticians take the background noise readings and put those into their table at page 12. And they say those are the background noise readings on the basis that do various calculations as to how music will come out of the pavilion, structures between it and the nearest noise sensitive points, and they use their various systems and programs, and you can see on pages 14, 15 and 16 pictures which show the amount of noise that could be heard, music noise that could be heard at various points at various times of the day. And the one that you need to be interested in, councillors, is on page 16, because that is the noise map for the evening period from 11 o'clock. And the area of yellow is much smaller, because the suggestion is, or the recommendation, which is on page 18, is that the noise limiting device is set at 75 dB. Now, I don't know much about setting noise limiters or 75 dB, but the program that's run by the acousticians is if you set the level at 75 with the background prevailing noise that's there, you can see the breakout of noise in yellow and what that would mean. It would mean, however, that residents outside the caravan park would not hear any noise at 75 dB. Now, what Emma has asked us, Emma Astor from Shared Regulatory Services, well, that's all very well, but we'd like to be there once the system is ready to commission and starts working, so that we can agree with you what the limiter should be, because it might be less than 75 actually. So we want to be there to set it, to make sure we're happy that that standard that I referred to at the start, councillors, on page 6 of the report, for events held between the hours of 11 and 9, music noise should not be audible within noise-sensitive premises with windows open in a typical manner, that it is so inaudible. And we've agreed to do that, and that is a condition on the licence, councillors. So that's the acoustic report as best as I can describe it. The conclusion is on page 18 as to the noise levels that should be set. We then sent you a noise management plan, which reflects what's already, what I've already told you in terms of conditions, and also what's in the noise management plan. The acoustic survey. And just running through that fairly briefly, at paragraph or box 3.2, the noise management plan deals with what happens in the event of a complaint. But it says at the bottom of 3.2 that amplified sound within the pavilion is run through a noise limiter, and regulated entertainment by way of live and recorded music will only take place outdoors after 11 o'clock in the pavilion area. So we've just beefed up in the noise management plan what we've already offered as conditions. Now, whilst the pavilion has this tensile covering, so it has a big canopy over it, it is still classed, councillors, as outdoors. That doesn't make it indoors. Over the page on the noise management plan at paragraph 3.2, we then say that operations in the pavilion will be in accordance with the noise assessment report, which is carried out, and at a level set and agreed in conjunction with shared regulatory services on setting the limiter. It's going to be set and agreed with your own environmental health officers, councillors, before we can use it. What we then say in box 3.2 is, well, we'll set the limiter anyway, but what we're going to do is we will do noise monitoring. This is the third paragraph down, by way of handheld noise meter, and that will be done at points P1 and P2, which are the same points actually as in the acoustic report, and that then will be done hourly after 11 o'clock. So there will still be done checks, regardless of the fact we've got a limiter. We will still make sure that we're doing these sound checks as well, and they will be recorded. Box 3.3, we just reinforce the fact at the top that in the pavilion there's a noise levels will be as such as recommended in the noise assessment reports, and the limiter will be fitted in conjunction and agreement with your environmental health officer. And then finally at box 3.11, the noise management plan again talks about the structure of the tensile covered structure. Both ends of the structures are enclosed by fabric mesh, infill panels, lower level glazing with entrance doors. And then the sound system. Now we have James Holgate on the call, who is the technical guru from Parkdean, but my understanding is the sound system it's called a Bose room match system. This is on the penultimate page of the noise management plan. It has 25 small satellite speakers, creating a dispersion system. So they're grouped, I think, into 12 groups of 2, and that means that you can more evenly disperse sound throughout the pavilion. And then, as you can see, it talks, 4th paragraph down at paragraph 3.11, that the actual noise limiting device is kept by way of a administrative password, so that it cannot simply be logged into and you remove the limiting device or hire it. So in other words, it's a tamper-proof operation and you can't tamper with the system. And also the system itself, penultimate paragraph, the system can actually be automatically configured to change the noise levels at different points during the evening as well, so it can automatically be set. So that's what we're going to do. That's the suggestion. Why do we want 2 o'clock, or we did want 2 o'clock? Why do we want midnight or 1 o'clock? We're obviously invested in the pavilion structure. We've lost Time Out, the adult nightclub, and that was one of the venues that we used during these event weekends. So we would have some of the music played in there. Then obviously we've lost that. That is now an Indian restaurant. So having made the investment, we wouldn't want to lose the opportunity of still hosting things like the Elvis weekend, the Rockstock weekend as well. We wouldn't want to do that, and therefore the proposal is that we would use the stage within the pavilion, but only to those more limited hours on limited occasions, as I've explained to you. We've also obviously had issues around COVID. I don't need to tell you that, because we've had to be a bit more imaginative about outdoor areas and people being in outdoor areas. People using outdoor areas, outdoor bars. I've spent a lot of time doing applications for a number of holiday park clients where they are looking to provide for outdoor spaces. It's not only for customers who feel better outside. It's easier for staff to go to dispense points and take drinks to bars take drinks to tables from outside areas rather than having to go back in. And there have been, as I'm sure you'll know, councillors, capacity issues with COVID, which has meant that as a result of COVID, certain venues have had to reduce their capacities. So that is also very much a consideration as to what we've done here. So the proposal is that people within the pavilion can sit outside the coast, the bar, Burger King, the Indian restaurant. You can watch the stage. You can even sit on the decking area by the stage itself. There are a couple of bars, as I mentioned, outside, or you can just take your alcohol from the existing bars and take them outside. We've got off sales permission, and we already have a 2 o'clock license for our bars there within the buildings themselves. So that's why we'd like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays. We hope we've been a bit more reserved in our request. You'll say, well, why did you go for 2 o'clock in the first place, 7 days a week? We would never have operated it to that time, councillors, but we would have liked the flexibility to do it, so that if an event suddenly came to us who wanted to use it, we would have that capacity to provide the entertainment to 2 o'clock. There's no application to change the hours for the stage area, which is to the south of the two buildings by the coast, Coast Bar and Restaurant. And there's no application to extend the hours for the area, which you can see on the plan. It looks like a square, which is to the east of the area, to the east of the pavilion. There is an area which appears as a square on the plan. It's rather difficult to do this without being there. That area there. There's no application to extend the hours for that area nor for the stage by coast. And just while I'm on that area, to just briefly address some of the representations, and I obviously know I will get another chance to do this in summing up once I've heard from the residents who are here. There was an event last year on the 28th of July. It was called Crowdioke. It was brought in. It's a third-party event. It's not so obviously we pay for it and it comes in. And that event, councillors, was held on in that square area to the right. And yes, we received a number of calls. And I know that Environmental Health, having spoken to Shared Regulatory Services, received, I believe, 5 complaints about levels of noise. Kelly, who's with me, was actually there on the evening in question. Having received complaints, the music was turned down. I've seen in one of the representations somebody who basically told one of the residents, well, it's licensed, so go away. We will investigate that. That's not acceptable and shouldn't have been done. We don't know who made that comment. It was a male, I believe, so I think it was Kelly. We will be investigating that. We had, with COVID, relied more upon outdoor entertainment. However, it was too loud that night and we can only apologise. The one thing I would say, councillors, is that complaint was the only complaint before 2018. So the last complaint was then 2018, and I believe that was a complaint about somebody singing to entertain people who were queuing to check in back in 2018. But between 2018 and now, that it was that one event on the 28th of July when it ended, I believe, at 10:30, having got more calls at 10:21. I think the event was wrapped up pretty quickly. It was in an area where it could be done. But to stress, councillors, we are not looking to extend the hours for that area. And that music was not going through a noise limiter. It lasted a single day. I think I've seen a couple of references for it lasting 2 or 3 days. It was a single area, and the event was wound up just around about 10:30. This year, that event is being held indoors and would normally be held indoors. It couldn't, for obvious reasons, be held indoors last year. And then obviously there are concerns, councillors, from residents about music being audible after 11 o'clock. Well, I've suggested the conditions. There's the noise impact assessment report that's been done. There's a noise management plan. And what I would ask you to bear in mind, and really the thing that in effect assures it for yourselves, is we can only play the music in the pavilion to those hours that we've requested once the noise limiter has been set at a level that your Shared Regulatory Services team are happy with. And they will only do that in conjunction agreement. We will only do that in conjunction agreement with them when the system's being commissioned, to make sure, and again for the third time, to make sure we comply with the code of practice about noise levels that should or should not be audible after 11 o'clock in residential dwellings. There will be no nuisance clause, therefore, because the limiter will be so set. We will, in any event, provide the contact details in reception and through your licensing team and Shared Regulatory Services to the residents who've objected. It'll be publicly available, the contact details in reception, and in any event, we'll also do these hourly checks anyway at these 2 points just to make sure everything's working as it should be, councillors. I think for now, you've heard quite a lot from me. You've no doubt got some questions, Kelly. It's very difficult for me, councillors, because obviously all our clients are in different places. I'm just looking at whether there's any messages for me to mention anything else to you, councillors. Do you just mind if I could have a quick look at this? No, I haven't had any other requests to include anything else. So that's it from me, councillors. But you must have some. You probably have some questions, I'm sure.
Thank you, Jonathan. Right. First of all, we'll give councillors an opportunity to ask questions to the applicant. Councillors, have you any questions, please?
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Jonathan, what is the situation as regards to receiving complaints from the residents of your site, those that dwell within the caravans? We talked about noise limits outside of the park, but I'm interested to know about what you're doing as regard to limiting the noise for your residents that are actually caravan owners.
Thank you. They likewise can complain. I probably have to ask somebody else who's a pay grade above me within Parkdean as to what happens if somebody wants to move caravans. Obviously, they choose the caravan they want, and they choose the closer they are to the complex, the more chance there is that they may be disturbed by entertainment. But that would be their choice, councillors. The same process applies for somebody who is staying on park in their caravan as it does to a residence. It's the same email, same telephone number. However, it's a lot easier for them to go straight along to reception or make a point the following day, or to Ben Kelly's here, who sat with me, because they know her. So it's a lot easier to make your feelings known. Councillors, I would just ask you again to have a look at the sound map that's in the acoustic report, the last one, which shows the noise breakout after 11 o'clock, and that does not extend very far at all into the caravans either. It's not in our interest, quite frankly, to I won't be rude, but to annoy our own owners on park or our own holiday makers, because quite simply they'll sell up, leave, badmouth us, or never come back again. Sorry, I don't know if anybody else has got anything to add from my extensive team at Parkdean.
No. Thing is concerning me is, can you override the limiter at all? Is there any way that could be overridden, say at 11 o'clock at night?
That really probably I'm going to have to ask James Holgate to do it, but it's in the noise. I think it's in the noise management plan. The detail is described at the end of it, councillors, that it is an administrator password logged, so you can't just go into it. It's a tamper-proof operation to prevent the sound levels being adjusted locally. Am I all right, James Holgate? Are you the right person to ask?
I am.
It's really difficult, councillor. Sorry, this when I'm not sat with anybody. James?
Yeah, no, that's my area. Yeah, so it is a completely tamper-proof, auditable system. So basically, it'll be set with a two-pronged passcode. So I will, as the overall company's audiovisual manager, put a passcode into it, and then a third party will also have a PIN number for it as well. So it involves two people to go onto it to get into the individual settings, if that makes sense. So it will be completely locked out. So somebody on park possibly will have it, maybe I will have it. But no, it also is auditable, sorry. So I can go on there. We can pull off logs, who has accessed it at what time and adjusted it, but it will be kind of set at the levels agreed, if that makes sense. Yep.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bonham, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. The first question, can you just confirm what you said was going to be the setting at the DBA level? Was it 79?
Mr. Bonham, it's at the back of the report. There are different levels for different times of the day. The DBA level that has been indicated by InAcoustic is 75 dB after 11 o'clock. However, if that is not acceptable to shared regulatory services, who will be there listening to the music after 11 o'clock and doing the various checks and commissioning with us to set the limiter, then it may be lower than that.
So 75 dBA on the table on page 21 of the InAcoustic report shows that sort of mid-range, 70 to say 60 to 90 in that range. So 70, 75 being in the middle of that. We're looking at us having inflicted on us the typical noise that people would have in the high street and inside a factory at that time of day. Is that
Sorry,
correct?
could I clarify that? Do you mind if I call you Mr. Bonham? Is that okay? What you've got there is that's the noise that is within the pavilion. So that's not the noise that is at, not sound levels that are at the noise measuring point 1 or noise measuring point 2. Right. That is sorry, just to be clear, that's the noise. Sorry, that noise level in the pavilion. So it might be a high street in the pavilion. Noise measurement point 2, the one to the far east, which I think is the nearest to, and bizarrely, actually, the nearest resident there actually is sat with me. She lives on Bayview Road. It actually says 320 metres from the pavilion. I actually paced it out with Strava yesterday. It was about 360 metres from the start of the pavilion, which has got the glass, the glazing, and then the mesh above it, and then inside you've got probably another 50 metres or so till you get to the stage. So it's at that point, Mr. Barnum, that the noise level is the 75. It is not what it's going to be measured at, the noise points.
And I've had some experience of one of these meters in a premises in Porthcawl. Some other residents may recall it, and they had one of these meters, and in fact, when it exceeded the set limit, it would cut the power supply to the stage. Is that the case in this instance?
Sorry, can I interject? Probably
I'm going to have to ask James Holgate on that.
No, it won't. There is 2 types of system. That isn't this type of system. This system, what happens is when it reaches that level, the system actually starts reducing the volume, if that makes sense, back down on itself. So it's what's called a audio compressor, basically. So if someone tried to drive the system, I'm trying to explain it, sorry. If someone tried to drive the system at a peak volume, the compressor sees that, and what happens then, it starts reducing the volume and keeps reducing it, so there's no way to go over it, but it won't cut the power. That isn't that's it's defined as a decibel audio interruption system. So that's the kind of system where you get an ambient thing and then it cuts the power. This doesn't do that. It forces the volume back down, basically.
So what indication does it give that it's actually undertaking that process?
It has audible lights on the unit itself, which is in a secure control room. So what happens is the user wouldn't know. Well, they would know because it would start reducing the volume. So, for instance, the entertainment staff on site would start playing a loud volume. They would hit a certain maximum limit that it's set at. They couldn't go louder than that because it would reduce it down. But on the indication of the unit itself, it would have lots and lots of red dot lights, and the red lights would start spanning out, which then start pulling it back down, if that makes sense.
And is there someone going to be monitoring that system at the hours which are being debated here?
In terms of monitoring it, obviously, like I was saying, there's no way that it can exceed the volume that's set on it regardless. But what we can do on that as well, like I said, is it can be audible, so we can look at how it's been working in terms of reducing the levels and things like that.
That's looking at it after the case. What about whilst the performance is taking place, which is when the problem occurs? So how are you going to regulate that?
Mr. Bottom, I think we've already answered the question. The limiter is a limiter that stops it going beyond a certain level, so it can't go beyond that. You don't need to be sat there watching it, turning it down on the laptop, because it does it automatically. I should point out we are actually employing here, as we have at some of our other parks where we have live entertainment outdoors. We are actually employing a park AV technician. I think that's right, isn't it, James? Who is responsible specifically for entertainment, noise,
that is correct.
etc.
They are there to make sure that the setups of bands, artists, performers are set up in the right and correct way. So there's a dedicated person on that site who'll do that.
So their working hours will be aligned to the same hours that we're talking about.
Yes, they'll be rotated in with the performances, so they'll be kind of on duty, and Kelly, who's the entertainment manager there, will kind of control their hours. One thing just to note in terms of the noise limiter, it's a very analogy. It's probably very similar to kind of cruise control in a car, if that makes sense. If you set your car at 70 miles an hour, won't go above that. It's very similar again to that decibel limit, if that makes sense. With that.
Okay, and how often will that be checked and calibrated?
The system itself, we have, so the company putting it in are a large national company called Willow Communications, who are working on behalf of myself. There's a yearly service of the system which is going to be put in place. So every 12 months, what's defined as a company, it's defined as winterization basically. So when the park goes quiet in January time each year, the system will be recalibrated and serviced and maintained at that point.
Can I just emphasise as well, Mr. Bonham, as I said earlier, that regardless of that, we will also maintain these checks at the two noise sensitive points, which are in the noise management plan. So although it's going through a limiter, there will still be the actual physical audio checks taken as well by members of staff during the evening, during those additional hours that we're applying for.
And I guess they're going to be trained to the standard required.
That they will, yeah, indeed. We do this quite a lot of parks. They've got these specially calibrated handheld devices. We do that to they do this quite a lot of other parks, and yes, they will be trained on how to use them. And obviously, we have our park AV technician as well.
Thanks for that information. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Back to the procedure. So, fellow councillors, no more questions?
Okay, sorry, Chair, it's Yvonne here. Could I just point out, I think we have a hand raised for one of the residents and Councillor Jonathan Pratt. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes. But the procedure says I should go to the councillors, then the licensing officer, then the police who want you, etc., and then the residents at last. But certainly, I don't mind changing that to allow Councillor Pratt to go next.
Sorry, they are part. Mr. Bonham was one of the residents, so.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So there are three others. So if you would go around in each of them, then.
Okay, Councillor Pratt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, a fascinating system that we are hearing. Can I just ask, as a point of query, if the system does break down or ceases to function, that Treasure Bay will cease entertainment immediately upon notice of this, and will take the rap from there, rather than the residents having to deal with uncontrollable noise. Thank you.
Can I interject on that one, probably, Jonathan? Yeah.
Yes,
So
I've no idea whether the system can break, James, so I'm over to you.
Well, like anything, if it broke, what would happen is it would take the entire sound system out for it. So everything. So basically, lots and lots of amplifiers, power speakers, but this main unit is at the top of the unit. So if that was to fail, if it broke or a component failed, no audio could get from that to the speakers. So it'd basically be a big wall that would just stop it working. So if it failed, there would be no audio at all, basically. Yeah. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else, please? I have no hands up. Right. Next one, Simon Judd, please.
Hi. Thank you for the time, Chair. The very interesting. Thank you for all the information. I was the gentleman who went down to the ground that day once I figured out where it was from and was told that we've got a license for this, but so off you go. It was really poor. I went down to the ground the next day. There were numerous guests or residents queuing up to make the same complaint. The noise that night on the 28th was an absolute disgrace. I mean, you know, the whole of the town is up in arms, and getting this application through was really quite poorly thought, in my view. I hear everything about the acoustic report. Reports and text and computer software can generate so much. I would like to see, or for the council to consider, a dry run before any licensing or agreement is passed, so that when this is running at 75 dB, we as residents, and we're up high in Newton, about a mile away, and the noise was incredible that night. And I've been to many festivals and I've never heard noise like it. That I think it needs to be run as a dry run operation, as opposed to relying on text and WizKids reports, which are all very good, Jonathan, I must say. But I believe we need to have a dry run test so the residents, the care home which is on the edge of the park, everybody can understand what 75 dB does sound like, because there's a written report and there's a physical aspect. There's no account in that report, as I can see, that takes into account the wind direction. And basically, we need to get clearer in our mind as residents that 75 dB is acceptable. I'm not convinced that it is.
Can I just interject? I've just had a note from In Acoustics to say that the actual system, Mr. Judd, if I can call you Mr. Judd, it is commissioned. It is commissioned before use, and we have agreed, I think I've said many times, but just to do it again, it's going to be commissioned and set in agreement and consultation with Shared Regulatory Services, Mr. Judd. And they are, well, for want of a better word, they're the environmental health team, and it's not in, well, it's not in our interest or their interest to make sure you can hear it, and you shouldn't be hearing it after 11 o'clock in your residential property with your windows open. So that is the code of practice we have to actually comply with, and the system will be commissioned and set to that level. And yes, there will, I don't know whether In Acoustics can answer this better because they will know it slightly better, but yes, there will be a commissioning test carried out, and it will be done with Shared Regulatory Services from BCBC.
Okay, in the event of that test taking place and numerous numbers of us in Newton or the surrounding areas on that particular moment say that's not acceptable, what's the procedure there?
If it's not acceptable, then I would imagine you will say to your environmental health team at Shared Regulatory Services, I can still hear it, and we're going to have to reset the limiter again. I've just had a note, Mr. Judd, say that the
process for that, because you sound quite offhand about that. So what is the process for that? Because we're very noise sensitive in Porthcawl, believe it or not, especially going into the hours that you're looking to go into. So at what point, I'd like to know what that process is and how understanding Park Dean will be about it, and also how vigilant BCBC would be about it.
I have to let BCBC ask that part of it. Obviously, we will be sensitive to it because, quite aside, Mr. Judd, from the licensing side of things, if we cause a statutory nuisance, then we will have a noise abatement notice slapped on us. And as soon as we've got a noise abatement notice slapped on us, if we breach that noise abatement notice, we are facing an unlimited fine. So it is not in our interest or a review of our premises license. We wouldn't want that. We've had no reviews of our premises license for Park Dean, and we could lose that permission if we. Sorry, can you hear something in the background here? I'm sorry.
No, we're fine.
That we will be vigilant over it. We'll have to be vigilant over it because otherwise we jeopardise our licence and we're threatened with being taken to court. But yes, of course, we'll work with environmental services, Shared Regulatory Services. Just one other thing I wanted to say, Mr. Judd, is that I understand from In Acoustic that the noise assessment report takes worst case scenario and assumes a wind factor in there. And I think at the prevailing wind, as in most places, is from west to east, and the assessment assumes it's a west to east wind. I can see Neil Morgan's got his hand up, councillors. Perhaps I could just pass over to Neil because he might be better to respond to some of the questions.
I did have a point to make about that. My concern is, it's all good and well, you've talked about the building, the temporary structure with glass doors and blah, blah, but fundamentally it's a tent with glass doors. So I don't think the structure is going to really do that much to contain the noise. It's open to the elements at the side. It's got a mesh at each end. I was up there yesterday looking at it. It's very impressive. Congrats. I don't know what the planning was for that. Perhaps it's a temporary structure, but I don't see the tent, the pavilion, being much of a buffer or a protector for the noise levels you're talking about. So it's not, if it was indoors, no problem, but it's not indoors. It is definitely an outdoor venue, and the noise will carry So I would expect BCPC and the residents who are on this to be kept well informed of any test dates, so that we can be, if you are granted this, that we can basically keep any informed of all test dates, so that we can give you true content from our perspective as residents.
I'll just answer one part before I hand over to Neil Morgan on that, Mr. Judd, that if, as you say, there is little acoustic quality to the building, and I have acknowledged it's outdoors. I haven't said it's indoors. I've acknowledged it's outdoors. If it doesn't have much acoustic quality, well, the noise limiter is fitted even lower. I'll ask perhaps Neil and Victor just to address. We're getting into very technical matters here, but I don't know whether Neil or Victor just want to address what assumption have been made in respect to the acoustic quality of the building. But I come back to the fact again, if we've overestimated its acoustic quality, the limiter will have to be set lower to satisfy the code of practice of inaudibility in the nearest noise sensitive premises, Mr. Judd.
Thank you.
Hi, so okay for me to speak now?
Is that Neil?
That's me, yes, Neil. Yeah.
Neil, because you can perhaps answer some questions I can't.
Yes, there's a couple of points to answer. The assessment doesn't necessarily consider west to east propagation. The prediction methodology considers an unrealistic scenario where the wind is blowing from the source to every receiver. So the wind is carrying the sound everywhere. That's basically that's the ISO 9613 prediction methodology. It considers a downwind propagation to all receptors. So that's already taken into account. It's thoroughly robust. In terms of the acoustic properties of the high tensile structure, the assessment only allows 5 decibel reduction for that. And in reality, we would expect it to be a lot more. We're talking a similar sort of structure to the external fabric of the O2, for example. Just to put that in context, a partially open window on for ventilation would give you in excess of 15 decibels of sound reduction. So we have considered a very, very worst case prediction method there. Now, the reason that in terms of the prediction, I know that I've not been referred to as a whiz kid before, but in terms of theory and practice, this is the reason we will be undertaking a commissioning test. So when it's operational, that limiter will be set according to on-site noise measurements and observations. And the limit that we are working towards is virtual inaudibility within the dwellings. And to put it in context, the noise level that has been predicted within the dwellings is actually at or below the acoustic floor of the Class 1 measurement equipment that we use. So we are talking predicted levels of that low. And that is what we're working towards. So regardless of what the level actually is inside the venue, we're working towards a limit at the residential properties of site that will be inaudible within those dwellings and will not affect your amenity. Okay.
Thank you, Neil.
No problem.
Simon and Judd, do you still wish to speak?
No, I'm pretty much done, but thank you for that, Neil, and I hope that's as it is.
Okay, could you take your hand down, please? And Neil Morgan, thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Charles Holland. You muted, Mr. Holland.
I think I should have learned after 2 years how to unmute it. Morning, Mr. Smith. Can I just clarify some of the conditions? I'm afraid some of this is going to be quite legalistic, but I just want to be clear. Page 16 of the agenda papers has the conditions on the existing license.
Yeah.
I think I can guess the answer to this. You're deleting condition 4. As you can see, there are 2 condition 4s. I'm assuming you're deleting the first and not the second. Am I right?
Yes, to answer condition 4, yes, I'm deleting the condition regarding doorstep. Good question. Thank you, Mr. Holland.
I thought you were. You've made some, you're suggesting some amendments effectively in relation to both public safety and the protection of children from harm, where you are changing the children's play area to the play barn. That's effectively the effect of the amendments proposed. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So if you on page 17, Mr. Holland, conditions 6 and 7 under public safety are exactly the same.
Yes.
Well, actually, 5, 6 and 7. I'll repeat it again under children from harm 3, 4 and 5. So we're seeking to delete 5 under safety, 3 under children because there's no nightclub, and yes, replace 6 and 7 under safety and 4 and 5 under children with the rewording because of the change of the names of the various properties.
It may well be. I mean, there are duplicate conditions that perhaps don't add much in duplicate. If we just turn that into single conditions, presumably your client wouldn't have any objection to that.
The less conditions, the better, Mr. Holland, although they will get longer, I suspect.
Yes, that's the generally sensible philosophy. Can I turn to the further conditions that were circulated yesterday? You've already told us about condition 2 and how it shouldn't refer to 2 a.m. It should refer to 1 a.m. I think would be quite possible to consolidate conditions 1 and 2 if properly worded. So effectively, the only area where regulated entertainment. This is obviously for the avoidance of any doubt of residents. I'm not assuming this application is going to be granted, but if it were granted subject to these conditions, we could consolidate 1 and 2, couldn't we, and effectively confine the post 11 p.m. regulated entertainment to the blue area on those hours.
Yes, the outdoor regulated entertainment, correct. Well, it's just live and recorded music, bear in mind.
And it would assist clarity, I think, if rather than referring to this drawing number 2005 TB 900 revision A, that we just hatched an amended licensing plan going forward. Any issues with that?
None at all. That is the licensing plan that was lodged there. That's all, Mr. Holland. So that is, I was simply referring to the plan that we lodged with the application.
Marvellous. Condition 4, the settings on the noise limiter. Can I clarify whether those settings, whether it's proposed that those settings only kick in after 11 p.m. or are the settings going to operate from before 11 p.m. for the purposes of this condition? I'm aware that you might say, well, its effect will be suspended under the Act, but still, I want to understand the scope of this condition. Does that relate to settings before 11 p.m. or only after 11 p.m.?
My understanding, unless I'm, I guess, contradicted in a moment on WhatsApp, is that no, the noise limits will be set throughout the day as per noise report or agreement with SR. If I call them SRS, Shared Regulatory Services, as you and I well know, without getting into too much detail, of course, they are suspended anyway before 11. But
well, it leads on to the next question, because condition 5, the premises license holder will observe the noise management plan. Obviously, this is an application to vary the license, so the only relevant representations are about the likely effect of the variation. This isn't a review of the existing license, but the noise management plan that has been put forward deals with more than the pavilion. It deals with the whole site. So I just want to clarify. The premises license holder will observe the noise management plan in condition 5. That relates to the noise management plan as it affects the entire site and not just the pavilion. Am I right?
We could have been very churlish. We could have been churlish and just said after 2300 for the area hatched blue, but we weren't, and we will observe the noise management plan.
But you could have been churlish, but you chose not to. The noise, I mean, it relates to condition 4 because your noise management plan at paragraph 3.11 speaks of stepped timings in relation to the pavilion. So some of these conditions are duplicated by provision within the noise management plan, but in other areas the noise management plan wishes to go further, and I just want my committee to understand the full effect of that. Plainly, I think we need, Mr. Smith, you probably agree with me, to define the noise management plan in terms of lodging it with the licensing authority, dating it or something like that, because these conditions need to be enforceable if my committee choose to impose them.
Yeah, I don't think I've had a problem with that, Mr. Holland. I think the only thing is that if we wanted to tinker about with some little bit, if we were in agreement with shared regulatory services, we could do so without having to put a minor variation into.
Yeah, well, presumably we could have a condition, the noise management plan to be agreed from time to time with shared regulatory services. Would that work?
That would work.
Just a question on 6 for the making available of the telephone number and the email address of the premises and displaying it at the entrance on the holiday park. Just out of clarification, rather than a legal question, would there be any possibility of displaying that on a website, given that it's 2022, or is that not going to be possible? Or is that something you want to take instructions on?
I'd need to take instructions on that. I don't know whether anybody within my extended team can answer that question, or at least send me a WhatsApp. Right. Can we come back to that one, perhaps?
We can perhaps come back. And then condition 7. The condition deals with the record of noise monitoring carried out, but it doesn't actually condition what the noise monitoring is going to be. Now, is it suggested that the noise monitoring obligation is contained within the noise management plan, or would it be more appropriate to actually condition what noise monitoring is going to happen?
You're muted, Mr. Smith.
I've been doing this for as long as you, Mr.
Have you been multitasking, Mr. Smith? Do you want me to ask this question again? Were you still stuck on the website suggestion?
No, I'm still waiting for a response on website, so I'll come back to you on that one. I think.
Did you get my question about noise monitoring? You appreciate the distinction that the condition deals with recording noise monitoring, but it doesn't actually require the monitoring to take place in the first place, albeit that is within the noise management plan. Is your client suggesting that the noise monitoring obligation derives from the condition noise management plan?
Yes.
Right. So
I'm still waiting for a reply on the website. You'd have thought that'd be an easy question to answer.
Well, let's not get distracted from that. We can easily come back to that. It's a standalone point. I'm asking about condition 7 on the further conditions. So the way this is going to work on your proposal is that the noise monitoring is conducted in accordance with the noise management plan. That relates to the whole site. And then the condition to keep records of that only relates to the pavilion after 11 p.m.
Can I just take instructions on that, Charles? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you you can see, Jonathan, it says what it says, which is that we're only going to, that the only condition is to maintain records for post 11 p.m. noise at the pavilion. And I just am exploring. I mean, obviously,
that's correct, Charles. Yes, that's correct. So we're doing these after 11 o'clock. So obviously, this is what the application relates to.
Sure.
Noise monitoring beyond that point at P1, P2. Happy to, and it's in the noise management. We will do that. And yes, the noise recording, the results of those monitoring at those points is then recorded after the 11 on those 11 o'clock checks.
Okay.
Unless somebody tells me otherwise.
So the condition offered, and this would be, you would say, consistent with the constraints on the committee's jurisdiction under section 35. This condition only relates to the activities of the pavilion after 11 p.m.
Correct.
I think it might assist my committee to know what the capacity is, what the audience capacity is of the pavilion. Do we know that number?
I think if, and this is if every seat was taken within the various decked areas watching what was going on the stage, it would be out. So I believe it's about 600. Somebody may correct me.
James Griffith.
But because we were potentially, of course, we could have looked at doing these under temporary event notice. But the fact was, I think, committee and Mr. Holland, that there was the prospect that we would have more than 500 people watching the actual what was going on to the stage. But we are awaiting the final full risk assessment to be completed, and that is we can't do that till the building's actually finished. But I believe the seating for somewhere around about, if every space